Welcome to Indivisible. I'm your host, John Stubbins. Thanks for joining us tonight, America. All Americans have a lot of questions and concerns right now with this coronavirus. And, I read this morning that our intelligence community is telling President Trump that China is lying and has been lying and did so intentionally about this outbreak of this virus. This amongst other concerns, begs many questions and hopefully some answers. I'm hoping my next guest will be able to provide some insight. I want to welcome into the show my friend, the Washington Times national security reporter, Rowan Scarborough. Thanks for joining us tonight, Rowan.
My pleasure, John.
So, about this statement by our intelligence community, what are your thoughts on that? Do you know about that?
It confirms that China has acted in an underhanded way ever since this virus was discovered, or the first cases were discovered in December in China. You can just list the awful things that the communist government has done step by step, which took us to this pandemic that could have been avoided in January if the world was able to take action, if China had told the truth. Doctors were telling them in early January, very early January, that this was an epidemic in the making, that it was being transferred human to human. And yet the Chinese put out a document, a statement in mid-January, that there was no evidence of human to human contact. And the World Health Organization went with that and told the world in a tweet, there is no evidence of human to human contact. And that was the first big lie that China told. They've told more since then. And the intelligence report, John, that you're referring to has to do with their numbers. And quite frankly, they're faking their numbers. They've stopped cases at 80,000 in a country of 1 billion people. And we know that that's just not true. And they've stopped the death toll at about 3,000. And we know that that's just not true, that they are covering up numbers. And this also, again, hampers the world in trying to understand the reach of this virus, because after all, it was born in Wuhan, the city of Wuhan of 11 million people. It more than likely came from a so-called wet market, a wild animal meat market in that city. It more than likely came from bats that are imported into urban areas in China, which is another one of their egregious mistakes.
Yeah.
Because they knew from the SARS epidemic of 2002 that bats spread deadly viruses into urban areas, and yet they never discontinued the practice. And so China is materially responsible for this pandemic because of steps they did not take to end these wet markets, and then by concealing and lying to the world about the degree to which this disease was spreading.
Yeah, the wet market thing, and I saw several reports on this. I was watching Tucker Carlson last night or night before, and he was getting into that. And, it just, I can't believe that the Chinese are even allowed to do this wet market. You see the kind of animals that they're selling, like you said, bats was one of them, but there were other animals. And it's just sickening to me that any human would be eating some of these animals that they're selling. And I guess they kill the animal, in front of the customer to keep it as fresh as possible for when they take it home. But here's my question. There have been other rumors. Obviously, China tried to blame our military, but we all know that that's a lie. We know that it came from Wuhan. They tried to, point their finger at the president, the left, saying, you can't call it Wuhan, that's racist. Well, guess what? I'm calling it Wuhan. That's where it came from. Now, it could have come from a wet market. There are other stories out there that there is a biological germ warfare lab in Wuhan. And some people are thinking that the Chinese may have done this intentionally. What do you think about that?
I don't think the Chinese did this intentionally, because they have too much at stake. They're a state-directed capitalist country, and they rely heavily on the revenue from their capitalistic enterprise to try to spread their domination around the world and improve and greatly expand the reach of their military. So it doesn't do them a lot of good to conduct biological warfare on themselves, essentially, as a way to spread it to their adversaries abroad. So I don't think there was anything intentional about this. I think the negligence of continuing to allow these markets to remain open with what they sell, which are bats that we know carry the coronavirus, and they then come in contact with other wild animals in these markets, and from that they can spread to humans. I mean, the history of viruses spreading from an animal to a human is in the history books. It just happens. And the SARS virus of 2002 was definitely spread by bats and definitely came from another wet market in southern China. So the Chinese on January 1st closed the Wuhan market immediately when a cluster of cases showed up of people who worked in that market. So they knew early on that was the number one suspect. So they hid that it was an epidemic in the making. They were negligent in continuing to let these wild animals be imported into urban areas. Then they misled the World Health Organization. And then they started telling a giant lie to the world population that American soldiers somehow planted the virus inside Wuhan. I mean, that's how despicable China's conduct has been. And yet the other part of this is many parts of the liberal media now in Washington are carrying Chinese propaganda, in a sense. They're writing all these glowing stories about how China is now delivering masks and other medical equipment around the world, and I say big deal. I mean, they're the ones who made the world sick, and half of the testing kits that they've delivered to some of these countries don't even work.
Right.
So I think it's time to end plaudits for China, because they're flying in some medical equipment around the world, and continue to investigate how they really deceive the world.
That's very interesting, but you're exactly right. We're going to take a quick break, America. We'll be right back with Rowan Scarborough. We're back with Rowan Scarborough. Rowan, a real quick question before I move on. Did you read anything this morning about foreign aid being frozen by the administration due to some troubling news?
No, I did not see that report.
I didn't get to read the whole report because I was going on air, but I read that and I was just curious if you knew anything about that. That's okay. I'll move on. It seems like 9/11 didn't really teach a lot of people on the left much of anything. People like Biden and Pelosi, they want, AOC, they all want open borders. It seems like now more than ever. Biden is out there saying that President Trump cut funding to the CDC, which is a lie. We know that's a lie. How much damage, Rowan, is the left doing to our national security with putting out these thoughts about, wanting open borders in this, especially in a time like this, where we've got coronavirus. AOC's out there saying we need to be giving stimulus checks to illegal immigrants.
What Democrats are doing today is trying to capitalize on this pandemic by getting their woke agenda adopted in states or by Washington. That seems to be their number one objective now. They want to do another stimulus bill to see if the woke items, taking over elections, getting rid of the border patrol or diminishing the power of the border patrol. They could not get it in the bill that started in the Senate, so they're going to try to get it in a new bill. And thus you see some comments from governors, Democratic governors around the country, that they want to capitalize on this pandemic, on this tragedy, to try to invoke a number of their own progressive ideas in their states. I think Governor Cuomo of New York said that this could be the new normal for New York State, which is kind of scary. And the governor of California is talking about a whole new progressive agenda that can springboard off of this tragedy. So the lesson should be the opposite, that we need a strong border. We need to be able to control at a moment's notice who is coming into this country.
Yes.
The President Trump put flight restrictions on people coming from certain areas of China on February 1st.
Yes.
The problem is that all during January, thousands and thousands of people who had been in the Chinese mainland, including Wuhan, were flowing into this country. So we have to assume that many of them were carrying the coronavirus, and thus they were seeding it in our country.
Yeah.
If China had been more forthright in early January as to what was happening, CDC could have alerted the president, and we could have had those travel restrictions on from the get-go and save lives.
Well, yes. And, I was just getting ready to say, Biden is out there today talking about how President Trump made a huge mistake by these travel restrictions, this travel ban. And you got to think, what is this guy thinking? Okay. This could cost millions of more lives lost. And this guy's out there touting that. Same thing with Cuomo and de Blasio in New York. These guys were telling New Yorkers just a month ago to go out. Their councilmen, I heard a number of statements from different people in de Blasio's administration talking about go out to the movie theater, go out to restaurants, don't be afraid to get on the subway, go do what you do normally because you have nothing to fear. And now look at New York.
Yeah, New York is way beyond the epicenter. I think it's half of all cases. It seems to me, looking at the numbers, it's more than half of all deaths to date. And the mayor of that city, as you point out, de Blasio, in mid-January, was telling people, don't worry about the coronavirus. If you're young, it's not going to bother you. Go out and have a good time. Go to the movies. Now, if there was a wrong message to be sent at that time, the mayor of that city sent the wrong message, because the virus was seeded in New York by somebody. We're not quite sure how it got in, and it has exploded. If we had been able to contain it in New York City, we would have much fewer cases and many fewer deaths. That's the history of how they handled it in New York. And look, we know the first case that came into this country came from Wuhan into the Seattle airport on January 13th. And that person, 2 days later, sought medical help, and he became the first confirmed case. And they believe he could have spread the virus to as many as 600 to 1,200 people himself. So that shows you exponentially how one person can spread the virus in so quickly that it becomes an epidemic, and then it becomes a pandemic. Same, John, with Toronto. Toronto's first case was someone who had come from mainland China. Yeah. And then you shift to Italy, the top death count, unfortunately, in the world. And their epicenter was Lombardy. Lombardy is home to hundreds, perhaps thousands of Chinese workers who are in this Belt and Road program that President Xi is trying to sell to the world. And those flights just kept coming in from China all during January because China did not tell the world the truth, and they were continuing to infect innocent people in Italy. And in fact, one cabinet minister, I believe today, said that he brought up in January restricting flights from China, and people called him a racist for thinking of that. That's how political correctness can lead to senseless deaths around the world, when instead of doing the practical thing, you do the PC thing. And of course, from Italy, it spread into Spain and France and in the rest of Europe.
Sure. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Rowan Scarborough. We're back with Rowan Scarborough. Rowan, President Trump, I saw another headline that he's going to be cracking down on drugs and the cartels during this coronavirus. They think that maybe we can't walk and chew gum at the same time, but I have some bad news for them. We can. My question to you is in regards to national security. We're hearing reports that the cartel has been and will continue to try to sneak terrorists into our southern border using, what the left is trying to stop President Trump through the courts to infiltrate. Do you believe that they are sneaking terrorists? They're talking about the cartels sneaking terrorists into the southern border, and I've also heard reports that ISIS and other Islamic jihad radical groups want to use this coronavirus as a germ warfare. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I'm sure they will. Jihadists are into mass murder, and if they can come up with a way to do that, I guess they would try to do it. Although they must know that they can't control it. I mean,
right.
Once they would try to capture it and release it someplace, it would be uncontrollable in terms of who it killed. I don't know if they have the know-how to make a bio weapon. I'm not sure they have the labs or have the ability to isolate viruses and weaponize them. I would think that would be long term. Now,
sure,
the cartels, their job is to smuggle stuff into our country, drugs, prostitutes, slaves. Anything that they can make money off the much richer country of the U.S., they will try. And if they think that we are looking the other way, they'll try to exploit it. And the cartels are just another reason why we need a border, why we need a southern border.
Yes.
If we do what the wokes in Congress want to do, the Democrats, and become an open southern border, the cartels are going to control our border. They're on the other side, and if there's nothing there to check what they send into our country, they're going to send in all the stuff they want. So they will effectively, an enemy of our country will be controlling our southern border. And that's why it's so illogical to ever become an open border country with the type of enemies that we're facing south of the border. Yeah,
and and the left wants it to be a sieve, come one, come all, and they want the taxpayer to foot the bill and pay for all the damage that they do. And by the way,
they want voters, John.
Right. Well, they want that too.
Yeah.
By the way, no Saudi oil. That's another national security issue that has been out there because we need to be producing crude here, American crude, not Saudi oil. Okay. Real quick before we take another break, what is your opinion on Carter Page's case at this time with the FISA abuse, the Steele dossier, the damage that's been done as far as national security, and how that affects everyday Americans.
Sure. Well, we just found out the DOJ, the Justice Department Inspector General, just did another report on FISA, that is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and it turns out that Carter Page was not the only target for whom the FBI violated the rules. The IG looked at 29 warrant applications to judges and found some of the same errors. Not as I don't think as egregious as Carter Page, and we don't know who the targets were in this case. They weren't disclosed, but they didn't. Again, the FBI and these 29 warrant applications did not validate stuff. And you're supposed to have good, solid evidence to present to a judge, because this is very intrusive physical and electronic surveillance. And they also did not get the proper supervision from the Justice Department, which okays these things and is supposed to be the gatekeeper for not letting flawed applications go to a judge. So that, if there's one lesson from the Carter Page era, it's that it's going to clean up, hopefully, the FBI and how it spies on Americans. And these two reports will prevent them, hopefully, from illegally spying on Americans. That's the hope that I see, John.
Sure. And I know for a fact that one of the people that was on that list that was undisclosed was probably General Mike Flynn. I had Sidney Powell on last week, and I've been keeping in touch with Sidney on General Flynn's case, obviously.
Yeah. Now, I don't believe Flynn got a FISA warrant. He did not. It's in the Horowitz report, the DOJ's, that of the 4 people they started the Trump investigation, they targeted 4 people originally, and only Carter Page was selected for a FISA warrant. They didn't have enough evidence for the other 3. And as we know, the only evidence they had to get this warrant was the Democratic Party hoax dossier.
Right.
So that's the other big problem in this whole tale.
The Steele dossier.
The Steele dossier.
Yeah.
That's the only evidence they had to be able to surveil Carter Page, and they didn't have enough evidence to surveil the other 3. That's how dismal it was at the FBI. Insanity, Rowan.
I want to thank you for coming on tonight for this very important national security report. Thank you so much, Rowan. God bless you, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. We'll have you back. We're going to take a quick break, America. We'll be right back. We hope you enjoyed tonight's guest, Rowan Scarborough, and I hope that it was informative to you. A very, very important matter of national security and how it affects so many different arms of what's going on right now with coronavirus, down to the Steele dossier, open borders, etc. And there are a lot of things that we didn't even have time to get to with Rowan, but again, we'll have him back. Thanks for joining us tonight, America. We'll see you tomorrow night.